Hello, welcome to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast, where it is all about helping amazing physicians just like you create a wealthy life free from burnout and with the financial security to practice medicine on your own terms. I'm your host, Dr. Elisa Chiang. Welcome back to the Grow Your Wealthy Mindset podcast. This week, I have a somewhat unusual guest. Allow me to introduce Samantha Chiang, a real estate agent, as well as my very first friend. I've known Samantha as long as I've had memory. Samantha, say hello to our listeners.
Hey everyone. Thanks, Elisa, for having me on here. Obviously, we've known each other forever. I'm a big fan of yours, so congratulations.
Now, you may be wondering why I asked Samantha to come as a guest on the podcast. If you've been following the news for real estate at all, you may have heard that earlier this year, around March, that the National Association of Realtors announced a settlement with a group of home sellers paying $418 million in damages and eliminating rules on commissions. The National Association of Realtors represents more than 1 million realtors in the United States. Prior to this ruling, sellers paid for both the broker and buyer's broker, and home sellers were required to include the compensation for agents when placing a listing on the multiple listing service, abbreviated the MLS. Traditionally, real estate commissions were 6%, 3% to the seller's agent and 3% to the buyer's agent. Now, new rules are being placed, including prohibiting agents' compensation from being included on the listing placed on the MLS, and another rule that will require buyers' brokers to enter into written agreements with their buyers. These rules are set to enter into effect later this year, somewhere around August. So at the time, we don't really have an idea of what's going to happen. So that is why I brought Samantha on.
Yeah, thanks, Elisa, for having me on just to kind of clarify things. There's been a lot of discussions in the news, a lot of questions that we've gotten from our buyers and sellers. So happy to clarify. I think number one, I would just like to say commissions have always been negotiable. So I think this is, you should feel empowered as a buyer, seller, an investor, whatever, to negotiate and discuss your commissions. This is something that we've always done. So just to give a little bit of background, my mom, Jenny Chin, has been a realtor in the Cleveland area for 40-ish years. I moved back to Cleveland from Boston 3 years ago, and I joined her team. And I did have my license in Boston. In the Cleveland market, and as well as Boston, I mean, I think generally, there was some people who automatically would assume that there were certain commissions. But yes, we always want to negotiate with you guys. We always want to be fair. And I think our clients want to be fair to us too. They understand that we're not getting paid until the deal closes. So I think that's an important thing to note. And I think, when we go over, we're saying, look, you wouldn't expect to work for free. We don't work for free either. That becomes a big part of it. And my expectation, and this is all new, is that the seller will still continue to want to offer the buyer's agent a commission because that really promotes more competition. And we don't want to prevent some people from entering the market because they aren't able to pay out of pocket for a buyer's broker commission.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing to note is that actually buying a house does become, in a way, cheaper for a new home buyer because they're not paying that broker's commission, which can be tens of thousands of dollars. I mean, the average home price is somewhere around $400,000 these days in the United States.
Yeah, and we want those, first-time home buyers to have representation. We definitely don't want them to be like, we can't pay for it. Like, you can come to a listing agent and they could write your contract, but that leaves you unrepresented. And so that's, that it's obviously your choice that someone can do that, but do you want to come in and say, oh, no one has my back, no one's looking out for my best interest? And that's really what the buyer's agent does.
And right now, as far as I can tell, that commission a home buyer would be paying their broker wouldn't actually be rolled into mortgage costs as well.
Depending on how you look at it, you're paying a certain amount. That amount gets appraised depending, what the amounts look like, if the broker's commission is included in that.
All right. So there is the thought that by including the broker's commission on the MLS that would entice a buyer's agent to show them the homes where they kind of get paid the most. So I think making that new rule that it wasn't going to be listed does lead to potentially not having at least that happen. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I guess that's something that I don't think we consider as much. And with the availability of data, like everyone has, everyone's looking through Zillow on their phone. Even if they're not looking for a house, it's like it's so accessible. Information is posted there. They're saying it's not allowed to be posted on Zillow. It can push people to broker websites where you are allowed to post that information. But I think also if you were buying a house and you have purchased many houses as an investor and as a homeowner, would you want to know ahead of time if your agent was going to be paid for by the selling agent? Would you want that information up front? To me, I would want that information up front and I can make my decision based off of that. But as an agent, we're not saying, oh, I'm not going to show you that house. Like that doesn't typically happen. For me, it's more of a transparency thing. Like I want all the information transparent and then I would like to make the decision that way. To me, taking it off MLS, you lose that transparency. And then there's potentially back deals, like this person's talking to this person offline, you don't have any visibility into it, which I also think is to me doesn't feel right.
So what do you think is going to happen once these rules go into place?
Okay, so we've been discussing this and like trying to figure it out because obviously it's, it's like what are they the prisoner's dilemma situation where you're like, if this person makes this decision, what decision am I going to make? And it's a lot like that because you don't know how everyone is going to react. I think that if all the sellers suddenly are like, we only want to pay 3%, what does that do? Are people able to still purchase houses? And I think that that's really going to drive down demand from the buyers because a lot of buyers don't have, as you said, tens of thousands of dollars in cash to pay an agent. Are they going to want to? Are they going to just be like, this is crazy? Are they going to go back to that? I think that we'll still see people wanting to pay the buyer's brokers. That's kind of what I think. I think some people are worried, like, is it going to move towards more of a transactional thing where the listing agent or, call it whatever percent will take care of both sides. That could happen. And then buyers maybe are not going to be represented. I think it'll really affect people who don't have as much experience and who are probably newer to the industry and they don't have the ability to kind of roll with this change. And there's been changes throughout the industry. So this is just a new one.
So do you think that maybe more experienced homeowners, people who are investors and buying investment property, they may potentially forego having a realtor themselves and contacting the listing realtor? So basically now they can negotiate down the price by the amount that the commission that would have been paid to a buyer's agent.
I mean, I think that's always a potential. I mean, also the listing agent already has paperwork in play, if it's posted somewhere. Their agency is already going to have that commission included. So if the person goes directly to the listing agent, they could potentially take the full amount and not reduce the purchase price, right? So that's still a possibility. There will be a contract in place. So I think that's one possibility. I think honestly, there's the investors we work with, we're working with one who's selling like 8 this month. So we're like very busy with them. They don't have time to do everything. So like you always talk on your podcast about, the value of time and like, what is that, the stress of it. And that's what a buyer's agent does. We do a lot of work. I don't think people don't, I think people appreciate that if you work with a good buyer's agent, the amount of time, the amount of stress, the amount of expertise you bring to the table. And even, for our investors who definitely could decide that they don't need that, they're still using us. And I think it's just, what do you want to do? You're a doctor too. I could be like, you know what? I don't need to go to a doctor. Obviously, I can just use WebMD. And you're like, yeah, of course you could, but that would be a mistake, you know? So people just have to figure out for themselves and what do you value? What do you hope to get out of it? And that'll be different for everyone, for sure.
Yeah, I think it potentially could weed out some realtors who really weren't hustling and doing all the legwork and being responsive. And it's going to make the realtors who were really hustling and doing right by who they were representing shine, and it'll still be worthwhile paying for their professional services.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's our hope is that, I don't foresee, I mean, I know there's a lot of different services that are hoping to get rid of like actual like people realtors and they're like, hey, you can use these transactions and just get all the paperwork here and do this. Those aren't blowing up. It's, we still have jobs, we're still working. I think, the people that value it are going to continue to value having a realtor.
So, how would you at this point advise someone who is a homeowner wanting to sell their home and talking about the commissions with their real estate agent?
Yes, this is something that we're having to come across now a lot, and it's always something that we discuss. But I think one thing is people have the choice. I mean, you could always do for sale by owner, so that's always one choice. But the people who choose to work with a listing agent, our recommendation is always to say you should pay the buyer's agent as well because you want to get as many people in the door, you want them to be represented. And also like if you think about it just from like a liability standpoint, like you want it to be separate. You want them to the buyers to have their own representation. You want them to, get their own information and to feel good about that. So from our perspective, it's worth paying that extra money for it. And I think really what you should consider is like, what do you want to get out of this? Like everyone has an amount, right? They're like, I want to make $100,000 or whatever it is. And we're say, okay, like how do we structure this so that the listing agent gets paid, the buyer's agent gets paid. And it's all for us, it's just more about the disclosure of it. And so everyone is on the same page, everyone is clear about what is going on with those funds, which is part of the issue with the lawsuit.
If a home seller is putting their home on the market, that's the point when they sign a contract with their seller's agent that they're going to discuss how much they pay the buyer's agent. It's not going to be a discussion once a buyer is found.
Right, that's correct. So in our listing paperwork, it does delineate specifically how much does the selling brokerage get paid. And from that, a portion of that goes to the buyer's agency. So it does specifically say, X percent and Y percent in the listing paperwork.
So it says that in the listing paperwork, but not on the MLS.
So yeah, this is kind of the weird part where it's not supposed to be an MLS anymore. But to me, it's this is an established number, and I think it would be preferable just keep being transparent about it. But for whatever reason, the judge had decided that, or the or NAR, the decision was made that it would not be posted anymore.
So if that rule comes to be and it's not going to be posted anymore, then how would an agent that is representing a buyer know how much commission they could potentially get from a seller?
Yeah, so that's a silly part of this where it's like the lack of transparency is not great. So they could go to the individual brokerages have websites, they can post that information there. So that's one thing. I think really what it's going to do is going to push a lot of people to call the listing agent and then they're just going to have to be like, what is the percentage commission? Which is, an extra step. It's obviously not as transparent. To me, it just feels like an extra layer of work as well as lack of transparency that I'm like, I don't understand it, but I guess it's not really for me to understand.
Well, I mean, I guess I could see that with that extra leg of work, then a realtor is not going to call every place that they show, and it's only going to be a place where they have someone who wants to put an offer on a property where they'll actually ask that question because now they're reaching out to that agent anyways.
Yeah, the only thing is like as an agent, before you go into the house, you're supposed to have established this because really before we go in, we don't know which house they're gonna like and or you should have something common shared knowledge of what that commission is prior to showing it. So it gets a little tricky.
So does that mean that a buyer should be asking their buyer's agent with each home that they see, like what the commission would be paid to them?
Potentially, if that's something that they're interested in. The other piece that you had mentioned was the buyer exclusive agency. So now buyers are going to be required to complete this form and they're going to be tied in with an exclusive relationship with their realtor. On our company form, which maybe it's different for other companies, there is the option of including a commission on there. So let's say I'm showing you a house, it doesn't offer any commission. You have already still agreed to pay me 2%. So that's another complication, I would say, that's involved. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to kind of see how that plays out because in that instance, let's say you agreed to pay me 2%. We go see a house that, they're offering 1.5 and then you pay me the 0.5 out of pocket. So that's a possibility as well.
I can see how most people who are looking by like a primary residence typically would just use one realtor, but I know a lot of investors will have multiple realtors to kind of essentially be looking out for a good deal, and whoever finds a good deal and brings in the good deal, they're going to go with them for that listing. So how would that work?
For sure. So you could be somewhat tight on your form where you could say like in certain areas or something like that. But I think it just would end up being more of a conversation that you have with your investor and say, okay, like obviously you're working with a lot of people. I mean, there's the option of can we have this territory and this person has this territory, or what can we do to move forward with this requirement that we're supposed to fulfill? So yeah, I think, like everything else, have a conversation about it, be open and work from there.
So you think with the new rules that investors will have to actually enter in contracts that just specify like different territories for all the different regions?
I think that, the legal teams would prefer that. Do I think that it's a practical thing? I guess to me, I have like practical questions and inquiries about this exclusive buyer agency that I think we're just going to have to work through at this point. It is new. It's not even really in effect yet. I think like working with different people, you're going to come to different solutions and we're all just going to have to do our best.
Right, because I know that especially when I was really actively looking at real estate to purchase, that if a realtor came with to me with like, hey, I've got an off-market deal, like it may be in a territory that, I've been kind of working with another realtor with, but I'm going to work with the person who brings the deal.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and honestly, it's like there's enough there's enough business for everyone that I think that in a practical way, does this make sense for everyone? I would say it probably won't. And it's also, there's going to be various commissions, there's going to be various XYZs. And are we going to have different buyers agency forms for like everything? I can't answer that, but it seems like it's just going to be create a lot of paperwork and a lot of back and forth, I think. And, it'll be an evolution for sure. We'll keep working to figure it out.
So let's just look right now at homeowners, either a homeowner trying to sell their home or a homeowner about to buy a primary residence. What are recommendations you have in terms of how they, enter an agreement? Because, it is possible that if a homeowner is looking to buy a new home in the same, area, that they may actually use the same agent to list their home while they're looking for a new home in that same area.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we work with a lot of people who, and especially currently, just because the inventory has been so incredibly low, that people are like, well, I'm going to buy first before I sell my house. So that becomes a big issue. We're not sure how they're like, I can't sell my house. I won't have anywhere to go. And it's a real concern. You don't know what's going to come up. So, I mean, I think most people are pretty active on looking for homes themselves. I think that's not as much I mean, realtors still are able to and provide that information, but honestly, we find that most of our clients are just they're just so in touch with what's going on in their marketplace that they're looking at. They're more like, can you show me these houses? Which is great. We want people to love the houses, and they obviously have more of a knowledge of what that house would look like and what they would like. Yeah, I think, definitely educate yourself, see what kind of where you want to be, what you want to be, what kind of stuff. I think something else that's pretty important is just to get a pre-approval. The interest rates have been very high, so we want people to have an accurate idea of what their spending power is. So that's something that we always recommend, is just to get an idea of what can you spend. Like, I live in Shaker where the taxes are very high. Make sure that kind of information is included as well. As far as, how I work, I'm very transparent. I want you to know what I know. So if there's anything, as far as like commissions or anything like that, I always provide that information as well, and provide all the disclosures. That we don't want to hide anything, and we want you to be as informed as possible.
Yeah, so it sounds like the recommendation you're giving to someone who is looking to either sell or buy a primary residence is really just talking to the realtor to get as much transparency as possible, to feel comfortable with where things are at with commissions, to listen to their reasoning behind what commissions to offer in terms of if you are selling a residence or a home. Any other recommendations?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think just try to get as much information as possible. I mentioned, getting your pre-approval. Insurance has been crazy the past couple of years. So I just went through the process and contacted like 6 different insurance agencies to talk about, what my options were. So that has been a very big issue these past couple of years. Try to get information. I would say definitely try to, if you're in the market, go look at places, things that are, well priced and are in good shape, or have been going off the market very quickly. To me, it seems like the pricing has been more stable. So you don't have someone coming in, list prices 500,000 and people are coming in at 800,000. It seems like the list price has come up, so that has stabilized a little bit. But, I think if you talk to your friends who have recently purchased, I would just suggest do your research before making any big decisions, because for most people, buying a home is their biggest asset. So as far as that, you want to be as informed and as knowledgeable as you really can.
And any specific recommendations for an investor who is looking to, let's just say, looking to buy a lot more investment properties?
Yeah,
And so they're looking to work with multiple agents if possible so they can get off-market deals, or, if something just pops up and they don't see it, that the first agent who brings it to them, kind of they are able to work with them.
yeah. I mean, I would say like work as an investor. I mean, I think, you know, and I'll talk about the Cleveland market just because we're here. And I mean, I'm sure you have other people who are in different markets. But as far as Cleveland, I think there's so many neighborhoods of Cleveland and, even Akron and other areas that are not as tapped. Things like there's some areas that investors have been there for a while, but there's really just so many houses in the area that are just like, they're not in good shape. There's opportunities for investors still here, and get out there, talk to different realtors, see what their capabilities are, what their, what their expertise is. I think a lot of people are like, do you want to do short term versus long term? And then we have people who do that, all of those things, who are able to buy all the furniture for your, if you're doing an Airbnb or something like that. I think, just get out there, talk to people, network, see kind of what they know, and then see what you can learn, and really get an idea of where you want to be, what you want to spend, how much you want to make. I think those things all will help a realtor provide better guidance. I think, people are buying in Cleveland, like downtown Cleveland, in areas that aren't great just because of the Cleveland Clinic. They want to be close, and they're like, doctors don't want to have to travel far. Those areas are getting bought for, under 100,000, 50, 60,000, and they're getting renovated. So, I think the more you learn about the possibilities, the better.
All right. Any parting words? Thank you so much for coming on today.
No, I mean, I think it's exciting time in our lives. I think where Elisa and I are in our career evolution, how do we create wealth and community and knowledge sharing? So thank you for having me on and giving me, the ability to discuss with you. I think let's all try to do something good for our communities and move them up and make some money and retire early, right?
That that is the goal of many.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for being a guest today. And I'll be back next week with another episode. Be sure to tune in. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you could share it with your friends and colleagues. And now for the disclaimer. I am not a certified financial planner, accountant, or attorney, and nothing I say should be construed as professional investment, tax, or legal advice. This show is primarily for your education and entertainment. I am a physician, but I'm probably not your physician. So if you need any medical advice, please contact your own physician. Thank you.